Hello, everybody. My name is Avril Kennan. I'm the CEO of Health Research Charities Ireland. So we are an umbrella group for about 38 charities at the moment, ranging from quite large funding organisations to very small voluntary run charities in Ireland, all of whom are focused on health research in various ways. And I am joined for this session by Michael Foley, who is working with the PPI Ignite program in Trinity College, and he's also the development officer for the Trinity Centre for Ageing and Intellectual Disability, and also Beck Hanley, who is the facilitator of the Charities Research Involvement Group, which is a group of over 40 or about 40, I think, Beck, health research charities that come together in the UK for PPI purposes. So what we're going to talk to you today about is a training toolkit that we have been working on for research charities that are starting a PPI relationship. So this came about because we've in HRCI, we're very focused on PPI, and one of the things we do is run a shared learning group, very like the one that Beck runs in the UK. In fact, we've copied Beck on that front, to talk about PPI, where about 18, 19 of our members come together and we talk about the challenges of PPI, how to overcome, how to do it better. And what happened was that as we had these discussions, a need emerged very clearly that to provide some sort of induction or training for the members of their patient communities. So for the charities to provide this to their patient communities. So as partners on the TCD PPI Ignite program, we spoke to them about this need, and they very cleverly went off and sought some funding to do it, and were successful in that funding from the Health Research Board. And so we have come together with them, and we've brought Beck and her expertise in as well to develop a toolkit for research charities or others who are beginning a PPI relationship. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about how we did that and what our process was and so on. And we had been hoping to more formally launch this around now. And of course, in the absence of that possibility, we've had to take a different approach. So we're using this opportunity for it to be our official launch, and the toolkit will be up on our various websites from the 25th, so the first day of the PPI Ignite Summer School, and we will tweet it and so on. So I'm going to come to my colleagues here today now, and Michael, to you first. Could you maybe give the viewers a quick sense of the process we took to develop this toolkit?
Well, I suppose how we decided that would be the best way to do it would be to have a co-design process with a lot of the research charities and their various PPI contributors that have been involved in PPI processes and in research processes with them. So that's what we did. We organized workshops where we brought people together, and we facilitated sessions where initially what we were trying to do was to raise some of the issues that we felt would be useful and helpful in terms of understanding how these relationships start, what goes well in these relationships, what kills off these relationships, what goes badly wrong sometimes in these relationships. And so, yeah, we facilitated sessions that allowed for that to happen and gave people a forum and an opportunity both to express things that they felt worked and didn't work, but also then to interact with one another, because as you can appreciate, what might feel like it's working for one person sometimes very much isn't working for somebody else. So that was the process that we came to, and very, very quickly what started to emerge was this idea that initially it was going to be a workshop and a toolkit, and then suddenly what emerged was actually one workshop was not going to work for everybody. And so we started talking about the perfect workshop that's never going to be delivered. So it was that idea that, you know, we were going to talk about this idealized workshop, but actually it was never going to be delivered because everybody was going to have to change it and adapt it based on the people that they were engaging with. And that's when the toolkit, I think, became even more important, because the toolkit was about having a variety of tools, a variety of different ways of approaching this, so that you could dip into it and you could find something that was going to suit the people that you wanted to engage with.
Yeah, exactly. And we had such a good mix of people involved as well. So we had 3 sessions over the course of developing it, and in those sessions we had HRCI members. So there was quite a number of the charities who very generously gave their time and their views, and then they also brought members of their communities, and there were some people in the room who also had research background. So we had a lovely mix contributing to the what is now the final product. And Beck, the charities in the UK obviously have this same need, and many of them have been doing this kind of work for years and years. How do they approach training? And you've seen them all through your facilitation of this group that you bring together.
Yeah, so we have this group called the Charities Research Involvement Group, and a couple of years ago we had realised that we weren't, well, some of us were doing training for researchers about how to involve patients and carers in research. And so what we did then was we came together a bit like Michael's described, and we co-created some training for researchers that our members could deliver. It was a big piece of work, and at the end of that we all fell in a heap, exhausted. And so we didn't get to this second stage, which was, how can we also offer support to the people who get involved? Because we need to have both sides, it's not sides, but both sides skilled up to make this relationship work. So we've got a number of member charities who are supporting patients and carers to get involved in research, and they've developed online training, or they ran face-to-face training before coronavirus. Hopefully they will again. But we've never actually got around to coming together and saying, could we develop something together that then everybody could use? And I think that's what's so great about this Irish project, was people came together to develop it, and then everybody can use it. You don't have to pay to use it. You don't have to, as Michael said, you don't have to follow it exactly. It's a toolkit. You can pick and choose from it. So I think this is what we haven't done in the UK. And of course, what we'll now do is pinch this and develop it further. And so it will go on, which is really great.
And I'm so hoping that the charities over there do pinch it, because I feel like we've been pinching for years. And it would be lovely to think that we would be giving something back, actually. Tell me, Michael, anything that surprised you as we went through this process? Was there anything that surprised you in terms of what the workshop participants, when I say the workshop, I mean these sessions that we had with the wider group, what they wanted to see from this toolkit?
I suppose when you're doing a co-design process, you have to come with a completely open mind. I mean, you have to come with ideas in your back pocket about things that might work just to get the conversation going. But actually, you have to come with a completely open mind about what people will want, because otherwise then it turns into your toolkit that you've already decided. And, like, hands up anybody who's been in those kinds of PPI processes, where the researcher or somebody has already decided what they want the contributors to say. So, I had to model what I was saying to people in terms of this approach, that we had to come with a completely open mind. But the one thing that did surprise me, and I'm so glad that I took it on board, during the second session, one of the contributors, a guy called Alan Finglas from MSD Action Foundation, he said, oh, well, because we're a rare disease charity, so much of what we have to do is online, because there's only X amount of people in the whole world that have this condition, and that we have to interact online. I was thinking, I hadn't really thought about that. I was thinking about all of these being facilitated sessions, face-to-face, the best way to build relationships. And I thought, yeah, well, actually, we better put in something about that.
And how blooming appropriate.
So, like, now in terms of all of the tools, what we had at the end of each one was, if you're doing this remotely or if you're doing this digitally, this is probably the best way to try and approach that. And we had even put in something about how to do it in online platforms like this. And I just kind of think, my God, like, what a save.
You were just genius. It was just genius foresight on your part.
Well, of course it was genius foresight. But again, I think that even in itself speaks to the benefit of facilitated sessions, where you don't come in with a pre-existing idea of what it is you want. You come in with an open mind, with a blank slate, and you say, right, let's build this together. And I'm so glad that, you know, considering where we are right now, I'm so glad.
And I mean, even a coronavirus apart, I do hope that it'll help to make us all more inclusive, because there's always people who can't be there in person. So it's really important that we have that option as well. Beck, was there anything that surprised you about what people wanted from it?
There was, actually, because I think I'm not as open-minded as Michael. I'm obviously a very closed-minded person. And one of the things that we did to prepare for the workshops was we asked the UK charities that were doing training for patients and carers to share with us what they were doing, so that we could kind of stand on the shoulders of giants. And so what I was expecting to come out of the first workshop was people saying, the most important thing for me in this toolkit is I want to know what research is about, because that's what I'd heard from a lot of patients in the UK. You know, what is it? Why does it take so damn long to do research, and those kinds of things? And actually what came out as a top thing in the workshops that we ran in Ireland was about relationships. How do you build the relationship? And that surprised me, really. Not that I don't think that's important. I think that's really important, but I didn't think it would be the most important thing for people. So yeah, that was a surprise. Maybe you're just better at relationships in Ireland. I don't know.
You see, I just think that that's really funny, because, you know, in Ireland, well, I don't know whether it's a particularly Irish thing, but I just think if you get the relationship right, you can do anything together. You know, that if the relationship is right, if the trust is there, if the respect is there, that, you know, the sky's the limit. It's based on your own capacity and your own, you know, your shared capabilities. But that if the relationship is wrong, then it's like a car that's constantly breaking down. You know, you can never trust that it's going to go anywhere at all. You know, you have to, like, to me, as I say, I think it's a really fundamental thing. And it's one of those things I think that people get wrong. And I was so delighted that from the very, very beginning, people were concerned about the relationship, because I kind of thought, okay, right, I think people are starting in the right place, because everything else falls in line if the relationship is good. And if the relationship is shoddy, or if the relationship is bad, then things fall apart. The best laid plans can fall apart if the relationship is bad.
Yeah, you're so right. And I mean, everything I've seen since then in terms of PPI just reinforces that for me all the time, that it is about the relationship, and it's about the things that we do. I mean, just like as if you were having a wedding or a big party, and you have to think about the things that make people comfortable. You know, you need to feed them, you need to keep them warm. As you did at the workshops, Michael, you need to have a charger for their phone should they need it. We were all very amused by how prepared you were. But you've got to get those basics right and make it enjoyable, and then create the space for those relationships to develop, not force it, not jump straight into the practical stuff. And yeah, everything I've seen since we did those sessions, it holds true. One thing that's not so much surprised me, but was just a very, I suppose, pleasant thing that I got out of it. So we had been talking about all these very practical needs and how we needed to support our member charities, and we needed to do this and that, and create documents and so on. And then Fighting Blindness, sort of partway through the process, Fighting Blindness ran a PPI workshop for both researchers and members of their patient community. You were there, Michael. And they used some of the things that were already coming out from these sessions, and it was just such a pleasant experience for me, where it went from all this information on paper to seeing it in reality, and just that reminder of, yes, this is what it's all about. And I went into that, I remember going into that morning exhausted and busy, and coming out just feeling refreshed, and yeah, this is what it's about. Were you going to add something in there, Beck?
I was going to add this thing about relationships. I think, you know, we say to people, don't we, that PPI is not a science. It's not about do it this way, and if you do it this way, it'll all be all right. It's about building relationships. So in a way, why shouldn't it have been? Why was I surprised that it was the most important? But anyway, yeah.
And I think, you know, for people who are wondering what they're going to see in this toolkit, I think that really comes through, and just lots of really good guidance on the practical things you can do to help the relationships along. Tell me, do you remember the more difficult conversations that we had through the process? Were there any of those that jump out for you?
Go on, Michael. You go first, and I'll think. I'll think.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I as a facilitator, I love difficult conversations, because usually it takes a long time to get to a difficult conversation, particularly when you've got a group of people in a room. And that actually, if you can get to the heart of where the difficulties are, then oftentimes you can really work towards a much better foundation. You know, so it's that idea of, you know, forming, storming, norming, and performing. You know, that idea that you have to go through a storming phase. So, and you know, being the youngest of 7 kids, I have no problem with conflict. You know, like I grew up with conflict, you know, from day one. So I have absolutely no problem about people seeing things from a different perspective.
We're a good match, Michael. I'm the eldest of 6, so I'm the one going, oh, no conflict, please.
So I think it's a natural part of life. You got to just, and like I say, as a facilitator, you're hoping that at least you can surface some of that. So at the very first session, one of the PPI contributors, I won't name any names, one of the PPI contributors said, oh, but your researchers, you know, like, you know, they're all over you 1 minute, and then the next minute you don't hear from them for months and months on end. And then he said something like, but your researchers only ever go where the money is. And you could feel it was like a Mexican wave of discomfort going across the whole group, as all these researchers all started to bristle and look indignant. And then one of them said, well, that's not really fair. And she kind of launched into him. And I thought, God, this is fabulous. You know, this is brilliant, because it usually would take a while to get to this. But, you know, your man kind of hit the nail on the head, that, you know, the researchers probably thought, oh, these contributors will all be so grateful to be in on this process. And he was calling out the fact that, no, we've had lousy experiences with researchers in the past. So what's going to make you different? And the thing about it is that the researchers so often are trying their best, and they're doing their best in terms of what they think they're trying to achieve, and that they're coming to this with an open heart. So it's hard to hear a criticism. But at the same time, you could really appreciate where both sides were coming from. So what it allowed us to do in terms of the toolkit is to really incorporate that into it in a very non-threatening way, so that conversations could be had about what people's attitudes were to research and the kinds of things that you hear, both on the positive and the negative side. This idea that the researcher knows everything. Researcher often doesn't know everything about everything. You know, or that researchers are only interested in money. Well, you know, money is needed in order for research to happen, you know, and that's a fact of life. So we've really stitched that into the workshops, where we try to get both sides to empathize with one another a little bit more about the practical realities of their lives and their situation. And again, that feeds into a better relationship. And as I said already, if that relationship is there and there's mutual respect on both sides, then you can really go places.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything for you, Beck, do you remember any difficult bits?
Yeah, I think the bit that stays in my mind was, it wasn't a difficulty between people, but there was a moment, I think it was at the second workshop, where some of the people who work for the research charities, you could see them suddenly think, oh God, I'm actually going to have to deliver this training. You know, Michael's not going to come and do it for me. I've got to do this. And I think it's very difficult. If you work in a research charity, it's often not a particularly big charity. So you're trying to have loads of different jobs within your job. And you may not have ever run training before. Or met with lots of patients before if you came from a research background. And I think there was a moment where you could see suddenly people going, oh no, I've got to actually do this. And that's why I think the fact that there's lots of practical things in the toolkit is really important. So you're not going to make them up. They're there and they're easy to use. And I think that to me, it was like, it wasn't a difficult moment because it was a conflict. It was just like you could just see people going, oh no.
The dawning realization.
Yes.
Yeah, that there's actually another piece to this. But at the same time, Avril, I suppose what I'd say too is that from the very first session, that I think what really, having talked about the difficult stuff, that from the very first session, what people were a bit shocked by was that this stuff can be fun. Like it's enjoyable, and it can be interesting, and it can be satisfying. And I think, we started at the very, very first workshop. We started with an activity that was actually quite fun, that everybody had a view and a perspective on. And I think that really kind of discommoded people in a sense. And it speaks to something I think that is much more deep-seated. When I speak to researchers about PPI, oftentimes the language that they use make it sound like PPI is some kind of hurdle to be jumped, something to get over. Oh, well, I have my DPIA, my data protection to do, and I have my ethics form to fill out. Oh, and I have to sort out my PPI, and I have to do my, data, open data stuff, And I kind of think, PPI is not a hurdle, it's a gateway. It's not something for you to get over, it's something for you to get into. That is really at the heart of it. And I think once people have done it, you don't need to explain that anymore. But so often you have researchers going, oh, do I have to do PPI? Whereas researchers who've done it are going, when can I do my PPI bit? That's one of those things that it was really nice to see that realization that actually PPI can be fun. It's allowed to be fun. And I think that just when you mentioned about fighting blindness, I think Karen and Laura and Melissa as well, when she was working there, I think that they really got that. And then when they ran that workshop, like that was such a hoot.
It was so much fun. Yeah.
It was really enjoyable, and everybody was in good form. Like it was serious work, and we did serious work, and the researchers and the contributors who had experience of vision loss were there doing work at the table. But God almighty, I laughed my head off, at some of the stuff, because it was people were so open, and that they were willing to say anything. In a spirit of honesty.
Well, I think you probably gave us the biggest laugh on the day when you talked about blind dates at a fighting blindness meeting.
I said, has anybody here been on a blind date? And one of the guys said, all of my dates are blind dates. And the whole place just collapsed in laughter. And I thought, right, we've won. I didn't really mind the fact that I'd made such a faux pas. But I kind of thought, right, we've won. People are really enjoying this. They're really having a good day. And the fact that people could have that kind of fun at something like this meant that they were going to be energized and open to coming back for more. And ultimately, I think when you talk about what's the goal or the aim of a workshop, that initial workshop, the one thing that you want to get out of it is that you want people hungry for more.
Yeah.
And, I think that regardless of how you deliver it, what you do, if the right people aren't hungry for more, there'll be people who'll turn up, and that they just won't be people who will want to be involved in PPI, even though they turn up because somebody told them to turn up or whatever. But if the right people are hungry for more, then you've done it. And maybe you haven't used anything out of the toolkit.
But, but I think it comes through the toolkit very strongly. Not just encouraging fun, but also giving a license to have fun. Because, if about half the people in the room are at work, they often don't feel that they're allowed almost, and also a license to not know everything. And I think that's really important for the researchers involved, because they're coming at it in a professional capacity where they're supposed to know everything, and they can't when it comes to PPI. So that comes through it as well. As we get towards our final comments, Michael, could you just give people a sense of what does this toolkit actually look like? What are they going to see?
Okay, so we've split it into two halves, and the first half is really exploring the kind of good, bad, and the ugly of PPI based on the experiences that were in the room, of things that go well, things that go badly, what kinds of things you need to consider and remember in terms of doing this. You know, you do need to consider data protection. You do need to consider accessibility and inclusion. You know, those kinds of things are addressed within the first part. And in the second part, then we're talking about the workshop taking the people on a journey. And that journey is obviously initially about kind of bringing people together, but then it's about what research looks like, how it works, how it's supposed to work in theory, and then how it actually works in practice. And then moving from that into the attitudes that people have about research, surfacing those and addressing those. Then it moves into looking at the skills that are in the room and talking about how those skills can work within the whole research process. So all the way from helping to devise the questions right through to evaluating the research and also ensuring that the research itself has impact. So it's about moving through all of that. And then it finally is about making an agreement. So we did a really lovely, as part of this, Laura Philbin in the Alzheimer's Society had asked us to actually do a workshop with her based on some of the tools. And she has developed a really lovely agreement with the members of the dementia research group that they have in the Alzheimer's Society, who are people with dementia or people who are caring for somebody with dementia. But they devised that agreement themselves. And it goes into lots of different areas about what you would have within an agreement like that. And sometimes it's really practical things like, you know, we want our workshops to be at this time of the day, because if they're at that time of the day, we're all going to be, you know, our energy levels are going to be down, and our ability to be able to focus and concentrate, you know, and they produce something really lovely. And so there's links in the toolkit into their agreement. So you can see practical examples coming out of this whole process already.
Yeah. Yeah, and Beck, we've focused a lot, you know, we thought a lot about the research charities and their needs for this, but I mean, you're the most experienced PPI person I know. Do you think that it's going to be of value to other groups within the broader health research community as well?
I think you could draw on this toolkit if you're a researcher, not connected to a research charity, if you're a different sort of research funder, or if you're a charity that isn't involved in research yet. I think all sorts of people could draw different things from this toolkit. It's not meant to be a set of instructions. It's meant to be a resource in the kind of genuine sense of the word resource. So yeah, I hope that people will take a look at it and draw from it what they find useful for whoever they are and whoever they work with.
Yeah, brilliant. And I know we're all keen that it be made widely available, and I think we're all keen as well that we maybe build on it over time as well, tweak it as we get feedback and as we have our own experiences. So we will continue to have these discussions around it, and also hopefully some input from the research charities in the UK. So I think we'll draw it to a close there, unless you have any other things you really need to say before we finish.
All I want to say, for those people who've sat through all of this and haven't really heard anything, I want to say one thing. This is not a protocol. I do remember having a conversation with a researcher at a HRCI event, and I was telling him that we were developing the toolkit, and he said, "Oh, great, I love a protocol." It's not. You have to decide what is going to work for your group. And maybe how you decide that is by doing a workshop and figuring it out, and doing it with people that you trust and figuring it out with them. Everybody is on their own journey on this one. And that this toolkit is really handy for you on that journey, but you are on that journey yourself. So if you take nothing else away from this, just take that away, that this is a toolkit to help you to figure out how you're going to do it. And obviously, in a lot of the universities around the country, there are PPI groups within each of the universities. So, you know, by using this toolkit and by drawing on them as well and their experience and other researchers who've done it, you'll be able to figure out what your journey is.
Brilliant. Great last point, Michael. So we are all going to be on a Q&A session on the 25th, the first day of the summer school, and hopefully, all going well on that day, the toolkit will also be available online for people to have a look at. And so all that remains is to thank you both hugely. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you through this process, and also to thank everybody who participated. So your lovely colleagues in PPI Ignite, Michael, and all the HRCI member charities and the people that they brought in from their communities who've all contributed to it. So thank you very much. Take care.